5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out again today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
He has elected to be called Trevor only. And as per usual, we're just going to discuss getting better every day, being relentless in our pursuit to do so. Last time we talked about asking the right questions. That is probably the most important thing, but you will realize, and if you don't realize, I'm telling you, this podcast is in a very specific order. And it is in an order that is going to deliver the maximum clarity, value, and effectiveness. And like all things, there's an appropriate sequence of event, right? It's foundation first, and then it's decoration last. That's finances, relationships, athletics, whatever it may be. Doing the right thing at the right time is going to yield the best success. And we call that sequential thinking, staying in sequence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Stephen Covey has said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I think that really just drives it home. With time pretty much being the only finite commodity, it just makes sense to truly try and maximize your most limited resources. See what you can accomplish more by doing less. Focus on the actions that are going to provide the most impact right now, not next week, certainly not 10 years from now, but today. Acting sequentially is absolutely essential for this.
Yeah, I think a good example is this podcast. I think maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, we sat in a room and talked about a YouTube channel, podcast. We had all these like giveaways with t-shirts. And it wasn't until we really said, hey, well, what's the main thing? Forget the podcast, forget the YouTube, forget the mixed shredded tank tops for now. Let's make enough money to sustain the business first. So a year and a half ago, this podcast was out of sequence. Right now we have a awesome staff that can handle some stuff, and Jonathan's time's freed up. We have some free time. Now is the appropriate time. And that's just part of the process, is identifying the task at hand and then staying 100% focused on that task until it's time to do the next one. Humans naturally, we're A to Z thinkers. We think start end. We do not think about B and C and all the other letters of the alphabet. And if you don't master the basics, the A's, the B's, the C's, it kind of leaves you with no solid foundation. It's similar to if you're a 15-year-old kid and you want to be LeBron James, you should not be doing what LeBron is doing right now. You should be doing what he was doing when he was a 15-year-old kid, right? Naturally, you want to go from A to Z, where you're at to LeBron. You cannot skip all those steps between that he has taken to get there.
This is kind of an interesting concept and a kind of an eye-opener for a lot of people. But A to Z defines a goal. Like you just said, I'm here and I want to be there. However, A through Z is actually the process. How do I get from here to there in a methodical and proven way? Not just meandering about and hoping I end up at the goal, but more directly. Without getting lost along the way and having to start over. The value in that, not having to constantly make up for lost ground, to be able to fall back to a previous step and hold your progress there, is absolutely tremendous. And without operating in sequence, when things get out of sorts, you really have nothing to fall back on.
Yeah, and that process of going from A to Z and then back to A is yo-yo dieting. And I tell you, since I've known Dr. K and Jonathan, I've seen literally over 1,000 people run through the process they've developed and eliminate that cycle. And speaking of sequence and where they're at, Jonathan, how many of them right now should be doing what I'm doing right now?
I'm going to go with one, that being you.
Right. And Trevor, you still do Jonathan's food. How many people should be doing what Jonathan's doing?
I think I don't understand the question. No, I'm just kidding.
Back to episode 1.
Yes, exactly. Jonathan is doing Jonathan's thing. Absolutely. That's it.
So what would the mistake be if somebody said, I want to look like Jonathan and started doing what he did and worked out a sequence, or somebody said, I want to do what Nick does and started doing what I'm doing. What are the consequences?
Man, the honest answer is, I don't know. But unless you're really, really good at guessing and the stars align perfectly in your favor, a pretty safe bet that things aren't going to go as smoothly for you as they would if you just went through a right process and went through sequential steps that were designed for you. You got to establish that foundation in order for you to build from it. And spending time worrying about the timing of your peri-workout shake so you don't let the anabolic window close on you, or how pink your sea salt is, probably isn't going to provide you nearly the benefits you're looking for if you don't know how much food you're eating throughout the course of the day. There are things that are going to provide a lot more benefit when done in the right order than focusing on the tip of the iceberg stuff and majoring in the minors.
I'm going to throw down a couple more metaphors here. I like your LeBron James one. And I think in terms of going out of sequence, the shiny aspect about it is that if you do things out of sequence, you can still make progress. And when you make progress out of sequence, it can kind of delude you into thinking that you can continue to make progress while working out of sequence. And to throw down a couple of analogies here, it'd be kind of like, watching somebody play the piano and they played the Star Wars theme. I remember this as a kid. I thought it was the coolest friggin' thing on earth. I saw a person play the Star Wars theme on the piano. That's exactly what I did. Right? I finally learned how to play the Star Wars theme. And then, I showed my dad or whatever. And then he was like, cool, play something else. And I was like, I can play the Star Wars theme song. So really, I had no friggin' idea how to play the piano, but I knew the combination of keystrokes to make something that sounded like the Imperial March out of Star Wars. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people, is that they'll go through any sort of process that's not necessarily in order, make some progress, and then when the progress stops, they continue to press on, and you kind of end up hitting a wall until you end up going in circles, like Nick said, you end up yo-yoing. So this analogy can also be put, into like the chemistry environment that I was in. You can learn how to make one chemical, but it doesn't mean you're a chemist. You can learn how to draw a picture, but it doesn't mean you're an artist. You can learn how to play the song on the piano, but it doesn't mean you're a pianist. So I think with the LeBron James thing kind of set me off there. But you can make progress, but it will be disjointed, and you won't be able to build on itself.
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
Jonathan made a great point saying A through Z versus A to Z. I think people are, maybe because it's a shortcut, like your Star Wars theme, people have this obsession with figuring out how to do something, a very specific thing, but not the skill set of learning how to figure out a problem. And that comes by going through the process. And I'll kind of let you guys talk about it because Jonathan's going to see it more than I do. But the sequence is, how to remove carbohydrates, for example, low carb. And when it stops working, you don't know how to figure it out beyond there. So you either slide back to A or you stay stuck. Jonathan, I don't know if you have something to say about that or how you get people unstuck or out of the yo-yo and get them back in sequence.
I think you kind of touched on something perfect there, or something kind of telling there, is when people start with drastic swings without any kind of foundation or any kind of concept of where they're going to go once that quits working. Once you take out carbs, what's next? Can you take out more carbs? They're all gone. Once you go paleo, you can't go more paleo when that stops working. So without having a sequential line of thinking, without building a base and taking a measurement and kind of adjusting from it, really, what are you going to do when something stops working? That's where that yo-yo goes. You start at A, you remove carbs to get to Z, it quits working, you go back to A, Then next week you remove carbs to go to Z, and you end up chasing that same 5-10 pounds year after year after year. Put it on, take it off, put it on, take it off. Whereas if you followed sequential ordered thinking, didn't necessarily look for a knee jerk or an instant, teleportation from A to Z, but went through all the steps and all the process and built the foundation, you wouldn't be chasing success, or you wouldn't be chasing the same 5 to 10 pounds that you lost. You'd maybe lose a pound, then lose another, then maybe hold tight for a little bit, and then keep adding to that success and keep building on that foundation. And I think that's the benefit of sequence. Life is not going to always go the way you want. And to have a fallback, instead of going from Z back to A, to go back to X until you can get back to Y, to go back to Z, I think is a big part of it. And I think it just comes down to sequence, having a logical pattern to follow that's going to be proven to be success. And a lot of that is knowing what to do when something quits working. And if you've already restricted everything and taken everything away, you really got nothing left to do. It's kind of like training. If you start off your workout routine and you go from 0 to 7 sessions a week, 2 times a day, what are you going to do that quits working? Add an 8th day, add a 3rd session. It's just out of order. It's not really the right way to do things. Trevor,
More about science. I'm super interested in your science background. Obviously, I ask you about it all the time. How important is doing the right thing at the right time, especially if you want to be a scientist like everybody thinks they want to be?
Oh, man. I must admit, it is pretty damn important in science. So important, in fact, that there is a universal method called the scientific method that describes in detail how to go from asking a question to analyzing the data you get from appropriately asking the question. And it is pretty darn cool because there is a feedback loop that tells you whether or not the question that you asked is in fact what you want to be asking. And I can tell you what, it is much more maddening to experience it that way than to try and have a conversation with a person and going back and forth. So I will leave it at that. I think just know that there is a method in science called the scientific method that does put you through that sequential process of asking a question and then analyzing the information you get from asking it. It is quite impressive.
And I think if it's good enough for science, it's probably good enough for most things you want to find the answer to. And that's why we have kind of developed a sequence that we want to put everybody through to as well. And, it's human nature to want things faster, and it's human nature to want things now. But, it's also human nature to pick up your marbles, go home and pout when things don't go your way too. And at some point we have to act above and beyond our human nature, quit being children, and actually develop the skills and the tool sets we need for success. And if you could try to buck the system and you could try to keep doing what you've always done, but you're probably going to get what you've always gotten. It may be time to actually build that foundation. And if you want to play the piano, work on becoming a pianist and not just, playing chopsticks.
Cool. So there you have it. The importance of sequential thinking, doing the right thing at the right time. And as Jonathan said, traveling A through Z instead of trying to jump straight from A to Z. So far, we've covered in the first episode, asking the right questions. Today, we covered sequential thinking, doing the right thing at the right time. And up next, we're going to hit taking a measurement. What can be measured can be managed. And we're going to kind of discuss how to collect the appropriate information to determine whether your A through Z process is effective or not.
Yeah, we're definitely going to look at how we can take measurements to make sure that you're set up for success and that your path to progress is going to remain true for you. As Nick pointed out, what can be measured can be managed. And if you're not tracking and you're not collecting information, you're just guessing. And I don't think guessing with your progress is what anybody wants to do.
Better every day. You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.
Thanks for growing.